Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly webinar series that occurs here on our Facebook page every Friday at noon. My name is Brianna. I'm an intern for Sustainable Transportation Vermont, and I'm here to introduce our speaker for today. Today we have with us Brian Collier. He is an artist, educator, and re-naturalist. He is also an associate professor of art and design at St. Michael's College, and he is also the founder and president of the Society for a Re-Natural Environment, and is in the process of becoming a Vermont Master Naturalist. So I'm very excited to introduce Brian today, and today he will be talking about his project that he's been working on called Unlawning America. Brian, thank you so much for being here.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks to you, Brianna, and thanks to Richard for inviting me. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and take over, and I'll just jump right in, and then I really look forward to our conversation and questions after I sort of talk about the overview of the project.
Okay, sounds great.
Go ahead and jump right in. Okay, we good? All right, so I'm here today to talk about an interdisciplinary art and ecology project I've been working on for about a couple of years. It's called Unlawning America, and the central goal of the project is to help influence a cultural shift away from the dominance of mowed lawn and to encourage people to allow unused mowed lawn to transform into pollinator-friendly meadows. Almost all the work I've made for the past 20 years has been pretty similar to what I'm doing now. And this is research-based interdisciplinary art projects that examine specific examples of our impacts on the other species we share the planet with. And I'm particularly interested in increasing awareness of our inseparable connection to all aspects of the natural world. My ultimate goal as an artist is to present work that makes it difficult for people to ignore the ecological landscape encountered in their daily lives. Ideally, this shifted perspective will influence people to make less harmful choices when interacting with these plants and animals we share the planet with. So, talking about an environmentally focused project when there's such unrest and movement for racial justice and social change should in no way diminish the vital importance of that work. In fact, my hope is that it should cause us all to pay more attention to the links between racism and environmental problems. We know from the study of ecosystems that all things are intersected. Environmental justice intersects with social justice, racial justice, economic justice, and human health. Of course, racists and authoritarians want followers, not thinkers. And people who stop to think instead of blindly follow often come to the realization that just because something is common practice or because they've been told to do it by their chosen leaders doesn't make it good practice or best practice. Ron Finley, who's pictured here in the center top, is a fantastic example of this kind of thinking and action that challenges convention he saw as wrong. He started a movement for growing fresh food in South Central LA by replacing the small mowed strip of land in front of his house with a garden. There are a large number of organizations and people like Ron Finley working to shift the ways we think about green space use and management. Despite these efforts, cultural barriers based mainly on aesthetics and fear prevent many of us from adopting these practices. You need only look around you, no matter where you live, to see that these existing programs have yet to produce a significant shift away from this dominance of mowed landscape. So this continued dominance of primarily unused mowed lawn is exactly what motivated me to undertake and to continue this project. We face an we really, at all times right now, we're facing an overwhelming barrage of environmental concerns that a lot of us feel powerless to resolve. So my project is intended to provide people with an easy way to take agency where they live and work to combat a number of these concerns by not doing something. By not mowing the lawns that aren't used for recreational activities, we can simultaneously reduce carbon emissions, reduce the amount of nitrates and chemicals going into our earth and water, use less water, and create habitat for pollinators and other important insects. Lawn currently is the largest irrigated crop in the continental US, taking up more than 40 million acres of land. Most people don't think of lawn as a cultivated crop, but that's exactly what it is, despite the fact that it doesn't provide for our food or energy needs. Aside from the relatively small amount of lawn that's actively used for sport and play space, lawn's only function is cultural conformity based on what I argue are misguided aesthetic standards. So imagine the immediate ecological benefits of half of those 40 million acres becoming pollinator-friendly meadows. Currently, most of this is mowed about once every week or two with gas-powered mowers. So imagine the reduction in carbon emissions if we cut mower use by half. This project is intended to challenge people to ask, why do we habitually mow our lawns? How much lawn do we really need? And also to consider the negative impacts of keeping a lawn. Lawn, in addition to being described as an ecological desert, has been linked to a number of serious environmental problems through the use of herbicides, pesticides, fertilization, water use, and pollution from mowing. In more arid regions of the country, watering the lawn can make up to 75% total household water consumption. A study from Purdue University shows that urban areas use between 30 and 60% of all their fresh water just to water their lawns. Then there's the issue of water contamination. So 67 million pounds of synthetic pesticides and about 47 million pounds of herbicides are used each year on lawns in the US. Much of this is carried off as runoff. These excess nutrients, also from the grass clippings and fertilizers, contribute to algae blooms, which deplete oxygen in the water, making it unsafe for recreational use. And these algae blooms can also kill fish and many other complex life forms. The transmission of these chemicals is made worse when frequently mowed grass, which does little to slow water runoff, is directly next to water bodies, hardscapes, or like pictured here in this sewer drain. Mowing with a gas-powered mower is one of the most harmful activities related to keeping a lawn. Until 1995, lawnmower emissions were unregulated. Older, more powerful, less efficient two-cycle engines released 25 to 30% of their oil and gas unburned into the air. The EPA estimates that approximately 800 million gallons of gas are used each year for mowing. They also estimate around 17 million gallons of this are spilled on the ground each year, getting into our air and water. Mowing also produces very large amounts of air pollution, much greater than cars and trucks. According to the same EPA study, 1 hour of mowing with a new gas-powered mower produces more air pollution than 11 new cars driven for the same amount of time. There's a growing scientific body of evidence showing pollinators and many other insects are in decline globally. This is incredibly alarming, especially due to the vital role these animals have in maintaining the health of our ecosystems. Iconic species like the monarch butterfly are in sharp decline due to a combination of climate change and habitat loss. And as a biologist once told me in relation to the monarch's decline, more milkweed means more monarchs. It's easy to extrapolate from that statement that more pollinator-friendly plants and habitat will mean more pollinators as well. So why do we have lawns? A lot of Americans have been conditioned to want large expanses of mowed lawn, and many believe turf grass is the best option for our residential and commercial landscapes. This cultural tradition can be traced back to English and French manners, where the lawn was really a display of wealth. Home lawns in the US started appearing in the decades after the Civil War due to the growing availability of lawnmowers. They spread thanks to the proselytizing of landscape architects Jackson Downing and his protege Frank Scott. So you may recognize that name Scott from the Scott Lawn Company, which is named after him. There was a great expansion of lawns in the post-World War II period when lawn-filled housing developments exploded across the country. Because few think about lawns in a historical context, we unquestioningly accept lawn as an essential component of American middle-class identity. So Unlawning America was designed to make ecologically harmful landscaping practices more visible and less ordinary to us. The project celebrates unmowed green space and models alternatives to mowed lawn. Perhaps more importantly, it's designed to frame non-lawn green spaces as ecologically and aesthetically valuable, challenging our deeply seated perceptions and reminding all of us that these were established through cultural traditions and questionable beliefs. The project highlights the enormous amounts of labor and cost, both financial and environmental, that lawn maintenance requires. There are huge savings of time and money available by simply stopping or reducing mowing, especially for large institutions or business properties. Based on all this information, I believe that the case for not mowing is very strong, and the solution I'm proposing in practice is incredibly simple. There are a lot of different ways you can participate in this activity, and I've actually been working on an unlawning kit pictured here to help people get started. The kit includes an Unlawning America sign, marking flags to outline the area that you want to stop mowing, and a booklet with information and strategies that can be used to create your own unlawn meadow. These strategies are things like creating shaped unmowed areas, bordering actively used areas with unmowed edges, mowing paths through unmowed meadows, or moving around naturally occurring plants into more organized arrangements to make them look a little bit more like a controlled garden. These are all intended to reduce the possibility of having your site look messy to the uninformed neighbor, and to leave you vulnerable, and which also leaves you vulnerable to local citations or fines. In areas that you want to keep as meadows, you may need to mow once every 2 to 3 years, we estimate, to keep woody species from becoming established and having the site turn into a woodland. This is true if you're trying to do this activity in much of the Northeast. Most of these places naturally want to turn into forest. So the advice I've gotten from biologists on when is the best time to mow to reduce harm to wildlife is just before snow or midwinter in places with no snow cover, or late winter to very early spring. And that eliminates the disruption of nesting birds and insects and stuff like that. Sometimes it's useful to increase pollinator plant diversity at the site through planting. So the picture that you just saw transform is called a biodiversity enhancement disc. Now this is something I designed just for this purpose. You can simply throw this into a mowed area and then let the area grow up around it. There's a cardboard ring around the outside, which is designed to kill or prevent growth of other plants, while the center disc, a mix of clay, compost, and native flowering plant seeds, is allowed to grow in what you see pictured here. And this is about 2 years of development. So each of the kit boxes has one of these embedded right into the lid. So you can tear the lid off and use that for this purpose. In addition to these strategies, some kind of signage to let people know what you're doing can help tremendously with public acceptance of unmowed sites. This is the official sign I designed for Unlawning America, and it's available to people either with the kit or by contacting me directly. Of course, it's really important for me to make this point. There's no need for you to follow any of my specific directions or even identify yourself as participating with this project. My goal is that I just want people to mow less. You can simply stop mowing or mow far less than you do now and watch what happens. In the years I've been working with and observing the development of unmowed meadows, I've been amazed at the resilience of the non-human natural world and the speed with which things recolonize land once we leave it alone. So by simply reducing or eliminating mowing, and by not using herbicides, pesticides, or fertilizers, we can make significant and measurable improvements to our local ecosystems. The need for this change is immediate, especially for pollinators in decline. Together, through this thoughtful inaction, we can help our ecosystem become healthier and more resilient. So that's pretty much what I have. I would love to continue this conversation and take any questions any of you might have.
Thank you so much. So we definitely have some questions. So the first one is from Jacob Weinstein. He is an intern at Sustainable Transportation Vermont as well. And Jacob asks, have there been any successful cases you have seen that have heeded your call to action and experienced positive ecological growth through it?
Lots. Actually, we have a lot of sites happening. Our first site was actually out at Shelburne Farm here in Vermont. And when the project was launched a couple of years ago, we had 6 sites on the property. They have since shifted some of the sites, and now we have one large site that's been developing over the years. There are also a number of sites I've had interactions with homeowners who have contacted me and said they've been doing this in their yards. It's basically, we ask for people to reassess if they use the lawn that they mow. That's it. If you don't use it, then let pollinators use it. That's essentially the core of it. So I bought my house out here in Hinesburg, Vermont, in 2014, and we reduced the mowed lawn area by down to about a third of what was previously mowed. And I can tell you, just in observing my yard that I use as a test site also, that the pollinator activity and the activity of animals has just been tremendous in what's grown. We also have sites on my college campus, St. Michael's College. We have now 3 no-mow areas that are transformed into meadows, and some biology professors I know this coming year are going to be doing some research projects, sort of comparing and contrasting the benefits and what's happening in the mowed versus non-mowed areas. And also, we're working on another site through my work at the Vermont Master Naturalist program with a comparative site that can be public facing and have information for the public so they can see what it looks like with these different strategies. So yes, lots going on. Absolutely.
Okay, and Jack has a question about to what extent do you think lawn care ties into modern masculinity? Jack Hansen feels as if a lot of men tie some sort of masculine pride to using loud machines to control nature and to keep their property in order.
It's hard to argue with that. I mean, it does seem like a strongly male-dominated activity, and this kind of, the machismo of conquering nature does seem to go hand in hand with this activity. I'm not exactly sure what to say about that, except for we men need to get over that.
Okay. And then Tegan, who is an intern at Sustainable Transportation Vermont as well, is wondering, for many students that are renting, how can they talk to their landlords and help get them on board with this project?
I think, again, it's just having conversations, whether it be your landlord or whether it be your parents, if you happen to come from a place where you grew up with a lawn. I think just sort of making this argument and saying, why do we do this? I think people just don't ask the question. People just accept this is how it should be. And there's just volumes of evidence that it's not a good way to go. So, I think just at every opportunity saying, well, why do you mow that spot? Do we need it to be mowed? If not, how about we put off a small area? And I think the best way to go with somebody who's resistant is, what if you just do a small border? Start with a small border and see what happens, and little by little, we can see these habitats transform, really. Start with the amount of area that you would put in for a food garden, or grow a food garden instead of mowing your lawn. There's lots of that going on right now during the pandemic. Definitely.
We have one intern who's currently working on transforming unused parking spaces into small gardens. So
great, that's fantastic.
And then Richard, just as a comment, he thoughtful in action. He really loves the phrasing of that. And since first hearing your talk about this, he can't help but notice large mowed lawns everywhere. And the concept that a mowed lawn is part of being a homeowner seems like it needs to happen a lawn at a time. Are there other local examples of this?
Well, the best, in downtown Burlington, there's Linus Owens has his yard that he stopped mowing years and years and years ago, and had some battles with the city and essentially won. I ended up, when I found out about him, I gave him one of my signs, which he put in the yard, which is actually it's so funny, but just a little sign like that actually helps tremendously. Marking your site. This is why as an artist and a designer, I feel so inspired to do this, because it's really about aesthetics. People are conditioned to see these spaces as messy, but they're not. They're incredibly rich and diverse and complex. So I think, the one lawn at a time model is great. And what I hope, like right now, if you're the one yard on the block that chooses not to mow your lawn, you're kind of the outlier, right? You're the freak. My dream for this project, and I'm, I don't take for granted that this will be easy to accomplish, but that the person who does mow their lawn is going to be the outlier freak and not the person who doesn't. That's what I want to see happen.
Definitely. Jacob has another question, and he's wondering, do you know of any Burlington or nearby town ordinance that require some sort of lawn care?
Yeah, there's a lot all over the place. They vary from place to place. A lot of them are very vague and say, you should just keep a neat yard. You have some requirement. Some communities have a particular amount of inches, like your plant growth in your yard can't go over 6 or 7 inches, or else you can get a citation and a fine. In the city of Burlington, I think Linus's experience shows that it was vague enough that he was able to actually make his case and be allowed to keep his beautiful meadow. It's full of, he planted a bunch of native wildflowers and things in there, so it's a great space.
So Richard also found it compelling when you say that at his place in your yard is the mowed space. Perhaps the idea that bringing these spaces back to life. He's curious what you have found resonates most with people when you talk about this.
I think it's a lot about the language that you use with people. It's a lot about, instead of calling it no mow or unmowed, if you talk about it as a meadow, as a pollinator meadow, this is language that has been developed over many years by environmental organizations. National Wildlife Foundation started their backyard wildlife habitat program well over a decade ago. And so there's this idea that this, a pollinator friendly space is a good thing. So we just need to keep building upon these cultural trends that have started, and really showing that the mowed landscape, even if you're doing it without using a lot of herbicides and pesticides, still provides nothing for all of these different layers of complex faunal communities. And so, it's just about that. It's like, I have little kids, so I do keep some of my lawn mowed. Ironically, this year I mowed a small area for the first time, just about a week ago, and my kids were out there arguing with me and telling me not to mow this and not to mow that. So we ended up just mowing some paths around through the space that they run around on the paths, and they run through the tall grass and they love it. So it's all, they're growing up with it. So it's normal to them. It's about normalizing the activity.
Totally.
Yeah.
And for anyone watching that is interested in these kits, how is the best way to get in contact with you for them? I'm
really easy to find online. If you just type in Brian D. Collier, I have a website. You can reach me at bd@briandcollier.net. But yeah, if you just search Brian D. Collier online, I'll pop up pretty easily if you do a Google search. You can also find me through my my college website, St. Michael's College. I'm a faculty there, so you can find me that way as well. And I do respond to emails. So
okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. And Tegan has another question. So her mom wants to take care of weeds. So Tegan's wondering, how else do people take care of weeds? Or
that's a great question. Why are they weeds? They're not weeds. Actually, most of the plants in our lawn that are considered weeds were actually brought over intentionally by European colonists because they're useful and beneficial plants. Dandelion is a great example of this. Dandelion is hugely beneficial as a food plant and a medicinal plant, and it was brought here for that purpose. Now it's the most vilified weed in our garden, right? People spend huge amounts of effort taking it out. But if you watch it, if you let it grow and actually go to flower, you'll see that it's one of the earliest flowering plants that come out of your lawn, and the pollinators are all over it. It's one of the first plants available to them. And so I don't think weed is a really problematic label. And it's actually one of the things that I'm doing through this project is I have a whole herbarium I'm creating with information called Useful Plants of the Unmowed Lawn, which is just pointing out and giving people information that these things that we call weeds are actually, you can eat right out of your lawn. You know, you can eat these things, you can use them for teas and medicines. They're beneficial for pollinators and all these different purposes. So I think it's not that how do we get rid of weeds, is how do we learn that weeds are not a negative thing.
Definitely, definitely. So I think that I have one question, but I think this is our last question. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the emissions that are tied to landscaping, and specifically what machinery is probably the worst to best, or not best, but.
Yeah, I mean, the 2-cycle mower is really bad. Actually, the worst tools that people use in lawn care are the leaf blowers and gas-powered weed whackers, because those are the little 2-cycle engines, and those are horribly polluting. I mean, I see people where my office is. I sometimes look across the street to where there's this site that's mowed very frequently, and sometimes I see a crew of 4 guys with 4 backpack leaf blowers blowing around about 30 leaves. And it's just insane. It seems like it really does seem like madness. But you know, there are a lot of great alternatives if you still, and I have actually a battery powered mower that I use, not very frequently, but I do use it sometimes. So the technology for battery powered machinery is just fantastic now, and it's affordable, and you don't have to deal with oil and gas. It's very, very easy to use. They don't break down. You just keep them charged and you're good to go for a long time. So that, you know, if you do still want to maintain or need to maintain a part of green space, I recommend that specifically. Or a reel mower. If you have a very small space, and just use the old style reel mower. That's just a mechanical push device with no motor at all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and answering all these questions. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to say or plug or anything before?
No, just you can go look at the project online. You can find it through either briandcollier.net or through unlawningamerica.societyrne.net. Everything's tied together. So if you go to briandcollier.net, you'll find all my stuff in this project.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to switch to announcing our speaker for next week. Thank you so much for being here, Brian, again.
Thank you.
So next week, we will be discussing Trains and More with Melinda and Rick Moulton. Melinda is a co-owner of Main Street Landing, and Rick is a producer and director. So they will be talking about the history of Burlington's waterfront and how it came back to life, the role of Main Street Landing, and the future of passenger rail. So tune in next Friday at 12 to hear Rick and Melinda. And thank you all for being here.